simple little device is going to help save a toddler's life, plugging the last tiny hole after a complete rebuilding of his heart. A boy with only half a heart.
This procedure is going to get him till he's an old man.
A robot surgeon
I made a stitch.
that fixes hearts. But my heart gets put through its paces,
Squeezing, squeezing, squeezing.
and I hold a heart in my hands. I can really feel the beating. I'm Alan Alda. Join me as Scientific American Frontiers explores some affairs of the heart.
Brought to you by
Agilent Technologies. A's, C's, G's, and T's. Hidden in all this genetic code is the genetic cause of disease. With technologies from Agilent, scientists can now start turning code into cures.
This program is also made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
It was the first part of you that had to go to work. When your whole body was no bigger than this, and before your mother even realized she was pregnant, your heart began to beat, even though it was no more than a tiny crooked tube. With luck and a little care and attention, it should beat 2.5 billion times before it eventually gives out. For many of us, though, just as the heart was the first organ to go to work, it's also the first to fail us. In the next hour, we're going to see some broken hearts get mended and find out how to keep them from breaking too young. We're starting here at Boston's Children's Hospital with a heart that's still in infants and that only a few years ago might never have grown older. Zachary's heart problem was diagnosed before he was born.
We first found out that he had some cardiac issues on a routine ultrasound on February 19th, 1998.
Basically, his heart looks like it was put together in a kindergarten art class.
Zach's heart started to go wrong just a few weeks after he was conceived. Instead of forming two main pumping chambers, one pushing blood to his body, the other to his lungs, his heart formed only one. He's still alive today because of two operations that have replumbed his heart, allowing its single chamber to keep blood flowing throughout his body.
That was good. You got it in there.
The first surgery he had got him till he was 5 months old. At that point, we had to have the next surgery or he wouldn't have lived much longer. And that surgery, which he's under right now, would probably allow him to live until he was 4, 5, 6, or 7 years old. But not much longer than that because his body's going to outgrow this procedure. And this procedure is going to get him till he's an old man.
So for the third time in his young life, Zach is prepared for open heart surgery. The operation he's about to have here at Children's Hospital in Boston is called a Fontan procedure. In a normal heart, blood that is pumped around the body by the left ventricle arrives back at the right ventricle to be pumped to the lungs. But in Zach's heart, there is no right ventricle. So to get blood to the lungs, a new route has to be built. And that's what the Fontan does. It creates a tunnel for the returning blood that burrows straight through the heart. Now, a single heartbeat can push blood around the body through the tunnel and onto the lungs.
You all set there, Bob? Let's go on.
The operation begins when a heart-lung machine takes over from Zach's own heart.
Yeah, the heart is stopped right now and is not getting any blood, so that's why we need to move along at this part of the operation.
Surgeon Richard Jonas has performed scores of Fontan procedures, perfecting his tailoring as well as his surgical skills.
Now we're going to shape this Gore-Tex patch.
With Zach's heart cut open, Jonas starts to sew the patch of cloth along its inner wall.
You got to think about how this is going to be folded over in a minute.
Then you fold it over, is that...
It's going to make a tunnel,
That's how it becomes a tunnel.
Yeah. So this is the bottom end of the tunnel starting to take shape now.
Yeah. I can't quite tell why it isn't in the shape of a tunnel when you put it in. Why do you have to sew it into the shape of a tunnel?
I guess it's not really possible for manufacturers to pre-form something for us, since every child is a different shape and size. So we really do have to custom build components to fit into an individual child. It really is sort of tailor-made specifically for a child's situation. Okay, well at this point we're going to make the fenestration.
With the cloth sewn in place, Jonas uses a punch to make a small hole called a fenestration in the side of the tunnel. Creating a deliberate leak like this seems strange right now, but in the days to come, this little hole is to play a critical role in saving Zach's life. But for the moment, there's no hint of trouble. After being stilled for 90 minutes, Zach's heart is slowly stirring back to life.
As the heart starts to get that warm blood, it will gradually start to beat. You can see the first flip, the top line there is the EKG. There's a beat there, there's another one, there's another one, and yeah, there we go.
20 minutes later, Zach's rebuilt heart is beating vigorously.
We're going to be coming off the heart lung machine in about a minute.
Zach's single ventricle is now able to pump blood around his body and through his lungs, almost like a normal heart. But it's about to face perhaps its greatest challenge, getting Zach through the critical few days following surgery. As it turns out, his rebuilt heart comes close to being overwhelmed by a simple cold. How is Zach doing now?
He's had one complication following the surgery, which is he developed a lung infection.
And that made it hard for the heart if he hadn't had the fenestration?
It makes it hard for blood to go through the lungs, and in this adjustment period after the Fontan, without the fenestration, he could have gotten very sick. He could have been stuck on a ventilator for a long time, and we've had children who've had a Fontan operation and this kind of lung infection who have died. So the fenestration...
The fenestration was vital.
I think so.
Zach's cold lingers for days, but it never becomes life-threatening, thanks to the fenestration. Here's why. His infection is making it hard for blood to flow through his lungs, so hard that his heart may simply have been forced to a halt. But by allowing the backed-up blood to spill out into the heart's main chamber, the fenestration is relieving the pressure and allowing his heart to keep pumping. Of course, not all his blood is now going through his lungs, so it has a little less oxygen than it should. It's a little bluer. But right now, that's a small price to pay.
This infection is exactly the kind of situation, if he didn't have a Fontan fenestration, would have resulted in a very high mortality rate, not unlikely that he wouldn't have made it if he didn't have a fenestration.
So the fenestration probably saved his life. Now he has lived through this cold, which could have been fatal, possibly. Now there comes a point where you want to close that hole eventually, right?
Right.
Why do you need to close the hole?
Because children can tolerate being blue pretty well for a period of time, but it's not well tolerated lifelong. And so if we left that hole open, eventually he would suffer complications from being blue.
So that's why you've got to close it, and that's why you invented this? This is a deceptively simple little device that closes holes in hearts without surgery.
And the whole thing now folds up into something quite small.
When I was a kid, I used to do amateur magic, and that's how you fold flowers that appear out of nowhere.
You're kidding.
Yeah, the whole bouquet. You just fold it up like that, and you could get it into a small space like that. The small space in this case is the tip of a catheter.
That's what goes inside the body. And we thread it up through a vein in the leg and up into the heart, and we watch it under an X-ray fluoroscopic machine. And we know where the hole is. And let's pretend that this is the hole here.
Like my magic flowers or a tiny umbrella, the device springs open.
See it snap?
Yeah.
And then I pull it back like this, pushing it back like that.
Wow.
This is 9-year-old Josh. He's lived with a fenestration for 6 years now, and it's time to close it.
The doctor was telling us it's kind of like a fine tuning. You got to tune them up before they send them out. So.
Josh's blueness is visible in his lips and fingernails.
The drill in a patient with a Fontan circulation is to give them the best possible circulation for the rest of their life, because it's a little bit tenuous. They only have one ventricle. And what we need to do is to optimize that circulation, so that they can be pretty asymptomatic and be very productive citizens into their 40s and 50s and pay taxes.
Josh's tune-up will all be done through a tiny hole in his groin.
Okay, let's take this picture just like this, guys.
Inject.
Injecting a liquid that shows up black on the fluoroscope reveals Josh's blood vessels, including the pulmonary artery taking blood to his lungs.
So you notice the diameter here is probably 7 millimeters, and then it drops to 4 millimeters, and then it goes to 9 millimeters, right? It's not a very severe obstruction. It's really only mild, and if he had a normal circulation, we'd ignore it.
But since Josh's heart already has a hard enough time pumping blood to his lungs, Jim Locke plans to use this metal coil called a stent to open up the constriction.
He's going to hold this with his beefy fist so that it don't move. And with my thin, delicate fingers, I'm going to push it up. See it there? Coming in, coming in, coming in. Okay. Blow the little balloon up for me. Right now, slowly.
A balloon inflated within the stent expands it to permanently hold open the route from the heart to the lungs.
Okay, so this should be very close to perfect.
Now it's time to close the fenestration. The twin umbrellas are loaded into their catheter and threaded up into Josh's heart.
Look over the wire.
The tunnel and its hole are invisible in this picture, but the first umbrella's arms are unfolding on the outside of the hole.
It's fully open.
Then the second umbrella is released.
We're going to take a picture now with all 8 arms open, one on the left side, one on the right side, make sure it's in the right place. You ready, guys? Inject.
Now the tunnel is visible on the left side of the picture. Some blood is leaking past the umbrellas, but that's because their cloth mesh is still porous. In the coming months, Josh cells will grow into the mesh, sealing the hole tight. The final act is to release the catheter, leaving the umbrellas behind.
And there it is.
It's all done, okay? You're in the recovery room. It's all over. All right?
Josh's blood oxygen, which for years has been at 70%, has jumped to the mid-90s.
Hey, big guy, how'd you do?
Just minutes after the procedure, and already Josh's lips and nails are pinker.
He's pink.
For the first time?
Looks good. A little dirty, but good.
For Josh and his parents, 9 years of living with his broken heart are almost over. The odds are good that his rebuilt heart will now allow him a normal life. Meanwhile, Zachary is home in Texas having fun. One day, his fenestration will also need closing. The fact that it can be now done with Jim Locke's little folding umbrellas means that, like Josh, a tune-up is all he'll need for his heart to take him into ripe old age. Jim Wenzel flies planes for a living, or at least he used to, before his airline grounded him when he was diagnosed with a dangerously narrowed coronary artery. Today, he's at the Ohio State University Medical Center, where he's about to be operated on by a robot. Jim Wenzel is one of the first patients in the United States to benefit from a technology that promises to revolutionize surgery. yet whose origins can be traced back to a now distant war. It was a war that also formed the background for a television series. MASH was set in a mobile army surgical hospital during the conflict in Korea. The real MASH units represented a major breakthrough in battlefield medicine. Before the early 1950s, in the helicopter, many soldiers wounded in battle didn't survive simply because they couldn't be treated by a trained surgeon quickly enough. Fast forward to the 21st century, as viewed through a promotional video made for the Pentagon's Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Fast check.
In the mid-1990s, the goal of a research program aimed at bringing new technology to battlefield medicine was to shorten still further the time between the soldiers being wounded and getting expert medical attention. 5 years ago, we visited a mobile surgical unit parked in peaceful Palo Alto, California. If this person had been wounded in the battlefield and he happened to be lucky enough to have a surgeon here, what's wrong with him? John Bowersox, himself a surgeon, was working with a team of scientists and engineers on a way to project his expertise into the battle zone while he remains miles away.
Right away. Well, it looks like there's about an inch-long hole in the small intestine. If we didn't treat that, what would happen is the casualty would develop a severe infection and die in a relatively short period of time. So what's needed to take care of this is emergency repair of the intestinal injury.
These were actually pig intestines from a local butcher's shop. Poised above them was a pair of mechanical hands. What do these things do? How do they get right down in the wound? This is the machinery?
Well, as you'll see, why don't we move them into position here? If you just move our position control.
That's this red button?
It is. Stop, please.
Yeah.
Good. So as you can see, just like the surgeon's hands, they're placed right over the site of the wounding.
Yeah.
And these are instruments that the surgeon normally uses.
The armored operating room was connected to this tent by a cable. But the plan was for a wireless link so that OR and surgeon could be many miles apart.
So this is the surgeon's workstation. Instead of being at the patient's side in the normal operating room, I put on these polarized glasses that give me 3D vision. Instead of talking directly to my assistant, I put on a pair of stereo headphones. And instead of picking up the actual surgical instrument handles, I put my hands in the half of them that are attached to the console. And now, it's like being at the patient's side.
John was seeing a 3D version of the image shown in the monitor that I was watching. How much like the real experience when you were over there?
Well, I think the most telling thing is every surgeon that's used the system, after working with it for about 15 or 20 minutes, will move their hand out of the instrument handle and try to push bowel out of the way. It's getting in the way.
John appeared to be as dexterous with the remote instruments as he was with the normal ones, aided as he would be in a regular operation by a skilled assistant. John could see Michelle in a small monitor in his workstation, and together they speedily repaired the wound.
As you can see now, I'm able to tie the knots in the suture just as if we were in the actual operating room. So would you like to have a go at this?
Yeah, let me try it out. I can't wait. This is going to be the first time I've ever done this. Despite years of doing fake operations in a fictional MASH unit, this was the first time I tried anything like the real thing.
And you need a pair of glasses.
Right, okay. Fortunately, it wasn't the real thing. Oh my God. Oh, wait a minute.
There's your left one if you just stretch it a little.
I'm terribly sorry. I banged into the instrument and jammed it into the guy's intestine. Wait. Michelle, control yourself. Snip, snip. Okay, here we go.
Alan?
Yes.
You're ruining my image of you as Hawkeye. You know that?
I'm not a real doctor. I just play one on TV. Now, I need to pick this side up,
Yeah,
right?
pick it. No, yeah, right where you are.
Right where I'm.
Okay.
Can I get it now? Have I got it?
Okay.
Okay, okay, it went through. Do I have too little of it? I'll pull it with this. Oh, I see. You pull it with the right hand. Okay. And I could sort of ease this down with the left hand, maybe. Grab the tissue. Okay. I was just one of many visitors to the Pentagon-funded project who got to try it out for themselves.
I did it. Look at that.
Yes, you did great.
I made a stitch. But the poor guy, I mean, he's going to have cramps from that stitch. Another visitor to the project in the mid-1990s was an entrepreneur who saw in the system the answer to a surgeon's dream. The ability to operate right inside a patient with a pair of miniaturized hands. To project their hands not so much across space as down into the patient's body. And it's this idea that 5 years later is being tested here at Ohio State University as a camera plunges through the chest wall of the coronary bypass patient.
That's the heart beating, and we're looking at the chest wall, and there's the artery that we want. The artery, that particular artery runs up underneath the breastbone along the ribs. We plan on using that artery. It's a little blue streak there.
The plan is to free the artery from the chest wall and sew it onto the patient's coronary artery just beyond the blockage. This approach to coronary bypasses is becoming increasingly common. What's different here is that the job of harvesting the chest artery will be done by a pair of robot hands.
While operating my hands, all that motion will be transferred to this miniature hand, if you will, inside the chest. This is the working end of the system. If you think about it, why do we make big incisions? We're working on small arteries, we're using tiny suture, because our hands are large. That's why we make big incisions. And what this system allows us to do is feel like our hands are inside the chest, but we haven't made the big incision. So the first thing I do is I take off my shoes. So I'll be using both feet and both hands. So I take off my shoes and then pull up to the screen and see that it's binocular vision. We're going to activate this now.
Randy Wolf's workstation is the commercialized version of the one I checked out 5 years ago. The controls for moving the instruments are now much more sophisticated.
When I turn my left hand like this, it does it. When I pinch my fingers together, this pinches together, it feels very natural. I pinch, I let go. I turn right, I turn left. Any angle my wrist makes, it makes at the tip. And this is very helpful in sewing vessels like this. You grab a suture, you can run it like this. If I give you a more panoramic view, any wrist motion is replicated.
As Randy moves his hands at the controls, across the operating room, his actions are mirrored by the arms of a robot inside the patient's chest.
The vessel is in this tissue right here, so I'm very gingerly or gently pulling down on it to open that up. And the first rib, the highest rib, is right here. Rib number 1, number 2 here, number 3 here, number 4 here.
This is, in simple terms, fun. It's fun because it allows us to do something that we love doing, which is heart surgery, but allows us to do it in a manner that is creative, in a manner that we think is going to benefit the patient by producing less trauma.
Okay, we're finished with mobilization. Note the time. So exactly an hour and 30 minutes. Okay? All right, now that's long for us, but again, we were working under more unusual circumstances than usual.
You didn't say extenuating, did you?
We were working under friendly fire.
With the chest artery freed, the next job is to clip it so that it can be safely severed. Robert Mitchler inserts the instrument holding the clip.
How about right there?
The clips will seal the artery until it can be sewn to the coronary.
We'll give you scissors to divide it. Okay?
Yep.
That looks good, don't you think?
Yep.
Let's have the scissors back. There it is. See the artery? That tube? So that's what we're going to sew onto the surface of the heart.
At this point in the operation, the robot's job is over. Right now, the Ohio State team has the FDA's permission only to harvest the artery with the robot. Sewing it onto the heart still has to be done by hand. In the next phase of the trial, even this attachment of the artery to the coronary will be done by the robot.
The whole sewing onto the heart took about 10 minutes to perform. So once we have developed the technology with the robot to the point where we can take the artery off of the chest wall in 10 or 20 minutes, it could shorten this operation dramatically from the several hours to really under an hour.
As well as being far less traumatic for the patient, the robot system could also make a big difference in the way surgeons learn new techniques. Right now, Randy Wolf spends a lot of time on the road training surgeons in the new technology. But that will change.
Let's say a Japanese surgeon wants to learn this system and they got their first case. They want me to help them. I don't have to fly to Japan. We can go internet too. We can bring the image up. We can hook up my system to their system, and I can mentor them, telementor them, while I'm sitting here at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, and they may be in Tokyo, Japan. I'll get a lot less frequent flyer miles, but I think I'll live longer.
The next step for the robot surgeon here at Ohio State is to do a complete coronary bypass operation, something Randy Wolf has already done with a robot in Germany. Following that, there are still more ambitious possibilities, including doing heart surgery inside an unborn child.
What's exciting to me is it's all imagination. You really need to act like a little kid with this technology and use your imagination, because that's the only limit.
This is the story of a 20-year effort to develop an artificial heart. Luckily for one of the players in this volleyball game, it was an effort that began to hit its stride in the early 1990s. Today, the attempt to build a permanent artificial substitute for a failing heart may be on the brink of success. Back in 1993, Mike Dorsey's heart was so diseased that he was on the brink of death.
I was very sick. If I'd have walked from here to you, I'd been out of breath at that time. You know, I couldn't do nothing. It gets a little frustrating when your wife comes and takes things from you, and you can't carry them, She would take them and carry them in for me. I wanted to do it, but just wasn't able to do it.
Mike Dorsey was rescued from death by a pump implanted under his own heart that helped propel blood around his body. It was almost 12 years earlier that the artificial heart first hit the world's headlines. But Barney Clark's brave struggle to live and his death after 4 months cooled the early enthusiasm for his artificial heart, the Jarvik 7. After a few more unsuccessful implants, the device was abandoned. But research on mechanical hearts continued. The most promising were pumps that weren't intended to replace the heart, but boost it. One of them was called the HeartMate. The designers of the HeartMate took a novel approach to a major problem of the Jarvik 7, blood clots that would form inside it, and that could kill when they broke off and traveled to the lungs or brain. The HeartMate's interior was roughened so that a thin layer of blood clots over its entire surface and sticks there firmly. Mike Dorsey's problem, one that he shares with thousands of others each year, was a weakening of his heart muscles so that the main pumping chamber, the left ventricle, could no longer pump blood around his body. Installing the HeartMate begins with cutting a hole in the left ventricle and sewing in a short tube. Then the electric pump itself is implanted in the upper abdomen. Blood flows from the heart through the pump, then back to the patient's aorta. By February 1993, Mike Dorsey's heart was near total failure. His doctors estimated he had just hours to live. Only weeks before, the HeartMate had been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for use at Fairfax Hospital in Virginia to keep a dying patient alive until a heart transplant could be found. The operation began with sewing into Mike's left ventricle the tube that connected with the pump. Then the HeartMate itself was slid into place. The connection was made between the pump and the heart it would assist. Finally, the pump's outflow tube was plumbed into Mike's aorta. The pump was switched on. And at this point, no one knew for how long it would need to keep pumping.
Right now, this device is approved by the Federal Drug Administration as a bridging device, that is, as a temporary bridge to help a otherwise dying patient to make it to heart transplantation. We're hoping that its long-term role will be much greater than that, and that actually serve as a substitute for heart transplantation.
Powered by batteries and controlled by a small computer at Mike's waist, the HeartMate clearly had the potential to be an alternative to heart transplantation. 7 months after the operation, it was still working fine, and Mike was still waiting for a transplant. The hospital exercise room had become only too familiar.
Not really me. I'd rather be moving where I have a destination to go to instead of standing in one spot and looking at the same old scenery. This is the battery charger here. In order to be more mobile, you take 2 batteries, these, and disconnect the power source from here.
That's the alarm that went off if there was ever a problem.
You don't have it right, they do not go. You just drop them into the pouch like this, hold the flap down. Now I'm ready for traveling.
Mike's traveling was confined to the hospital, where he'd become a familiar figure.
Transplant center.
To pass the time and make himself useful, Mike helped out in the transplant center. He became an invaluable source of knowledge, advice, and reassurance for other heart patients, especially those who might also need transplants.
I've been here since January 27th.
6 months, 7 months already?
Yeah.
Have you been out yet? Been outside the hospital?
I haven't left the grounds.
Oh.
I've threatened to, but I haven't left yet. The staff and nurse and everything has been great, but it's almost like being in prison. I mean, you got to ask permission to do this and do that, you know, instead of, I can't just go outside my door and outside and get a breath of fresh air without asking first and stuff like that. The little things you miss in life.
He was desperately ill and dying when we put the device in. The unit has allowed him to recover so that he feels well, perfectly well now. Completely different than when he entered the hospital. Of course, he feels like he shouldn't be in the hospital.
But the care and maintenance of the systems that kept Mike alive meant that leaving the hospital, even for a short trip, was a very big deal. A lot of things could have gone wrong.
This tube down here is for the vent line, so it allows the pump to breathe in and out. The circle around up here, and this little sock on here filters it. And you can feel the air, you know, coming in and out.
The pump sucked air in and out with every beat. And if the air tube became blocked, the pump would slow and eventually stop.
And it's one night I had rolled over on this side, and it got kinked over like that. And I'm looking at the screen up here, and once the numbers start dropping down, And I'm wondering what's going on, and all of a sudden the alarm went off. And you know, as soon as I set up, the alarm stopped.
Mike, we're going to go over...
But the air tube could also be a lifeline, offering the hope of at least a brief break from the hospital.
For your pump.
This hand pump could be connected to Mike's air tube, and it would keep the HeartMate pumping blood even if its power supply or computer control failed, which is what happened unexpectedly during a routine check.
You're all right. Go ahead.
How you feeling, Mike?
Okay.
During the 5 or 6 minutes it took to figure out the problem, a loose connection, Mike's artificial heart was kept beating with the hand pump.
Oh, just another day here, I guess, to me.
As long as the hand pump went everywhere he went, Mike had at least partial freedom, and he was able to stroll the hospital grounds.
You don't have to trim it.
Mike was one of the first of what has become several hundred patients whose lives have been extended by the HeartMate while on the waiting list for a human heart.
No.
You got to look at it both ways. Unfortunately, somebody's got to pass away in order for you to have a donor. You know, and I'm not going to wish that on anybody. At the same time, I would like to be transplanted and released too.
Mike's first taste of freedom came with a short trip with his family, along with plenty of medical backup. Too cumbersome to itself be a permanent solution, the HeartMate was an important bridge, not only for those like Mike awaiting human hearts, but also to the future of mechanical alternatives. Mike got his heart transplant only 3 weeks after this trip, and 7 years later, he's still alive and well. Meanwhile, the HeartMate itself has been reborn, and it's now small and efficient enough so that it could soon be a practical alternative to heart transplantation. Like its predecessor, however, the HeartMate 2 is designed to assist a failing heart, not substitute for it. But these chambers are incubating a device that is intended not just to help a heart, but to replace it entirely. We visited the factory where mechanical hearts are being manufactured by the hundred just a few months before the first one was scheduled to be implanted in a human patient. The Abiomed artificial heart is modeled on the human one, with 2 main pumping chambers and valves to control blood flow. As the blood goes through there, it pushes its way through, but it can't come back the other way, right?
Correct.
Can that be relied on after it pumps thousands of times, if you pass through it, after it flexes thousands of times to maintain that same resiliency?
The answer is yes, and it's not thousands of times. It's approximately 100,000 times per day.
Oh, boy.
Which is close to 40 million times per year.
40 million times. You can flex this material 40 million times. And
without it breaking.
Without not only breaking, but just weakening, softening, and fluttering, and that kind of thing.
Correct.
So this is where you test the valves?
Yes, this is where we test. We have many, many valves under test, and we test them under very severe conditions and at accelerated rates. We can demonstrate 20 years equivalence in 1 year.
Just like its rival, the HeartMate, the Abiomed heart is designed to avoid the danger of blood clots forming inside it. But while the HeartMate has a deliberately roughened interior surface, the Abiomed heart aims to be completely smooth and seamless. Clotting is also avoided by swirling the blood, simulated here by fish scales in water, so that it doesn't pool anywhere inside the pump.
Just the outflow.
But it's not until I get to hold the heart while it's pumping that I really appreciate how powerful it has to be to substitute for a human heart. I can really feel the beating. Now, interestingly, when you see a heart pumping, the outside of the heart is going like that. You see the motion on the outside. Here, all the motion is inside this device. I've held onto this heart long enough. Would you mind holding that for a day or two?
So So right now I'm going to take away the skin.
This is a CT scan of a potential patient. Converted to computer graphics, the patient's body can be stripped of its major organs, including most of the diseased heart. Then a technician at Abiomed can insert a virtual artificial heart into the virtual patient, helping the surgeon plan how best to fit the heart to the real patient during the operation. The Abiomed heart gets its power from rechargeable batteries that transmit their energy through the skin, avoiding the tubes and wires that so plagued Mike Dorsey 7 years ago. As well as being tested in tanks, the entire system, heart and power supply, has been implanted in cows.
Through the telephone lines, we're dialing into one of our implanted cows somewhere in the United States. This one happens to be in Kentucky.
And when it's standing near a window, what does that mean?
This means there are several cows and one happens to be near the window, so we're monitoring.
So it's literally near the window.
We haven't given them a name yet.
Right, okay. So this is fascinating. So you're going to see now information coming in from a particular cow who's using one of these artificial hearts. So there it is. Similar real-time data from the artificial heart will also be gathered from the first human patients. How do they get a signal that something's going wrong? They're having dinner and all of a sudden they get a phone call from you and they say, you say, lie down immediately. What happens?
My first comment to you with regard to that question is, wouldn't it be nice if we could do that with our natural hearts?
Yes, it
Right?
would, yeah.
It would be very nice if we could have remote monitoring of our hearts. If anything goes wrong, we would have an alert that tells us, gee, we can fix it, just get to the hospital. Now, how do you do that? We have cell phone technology, so the patient has a cell phone. Now we can call the patient and say, you know, the output of your heart is not quite what we think it ought to be, so why don't you come back to the hospital?
During our filming, Abiomed was already manufacturing hearts ready for implantation and was opening a new plant to scale up production further. Meanwhile, 5 medical teams in hospitals around the country are on standby, awaiting only approval from the FDA before one of the teams implants the first of these hearts in a human patient. Are you going to be extending a lot of people's lives because now they'll be able to have an artificial heart?
We hope yes. The fact is that 2,000 years ago, the average lifespan was 30 years. And 100 years ago, the average lifetime was 47 years. And today, the average lifetime is 75 years. And there are a large number of people who reach 75 and beyond who are neurologically intact, who are very productive. And the only thing that is wrong is either a hip, which we replace today, or a muscle, like the heart, which we should be able to replace. And there is no reason why the end of life should come prematurely. And it doesn't matter what the age. You can be 80 or 90. If you're productive, you should be able to live longer. "20 miles west of Boston is a town whose chief claim to fame was once that it housed the world's first shopping mall. But today, it can claim another honor, that collectively its inhabitants have saved more lives, running perhaps into the millions, than any other group of ordinary citizens in the world. The town is Framingham. Just over 50 years ago, 5,000 of its people signed up for what became known as the Framingham Heart Study. Year after year, those 5,000 have allowed themselves to be hooked up to machines that monitored anything and everything that might conceivably have a connection with heart disease. Over the years, they've even recruited a few guests.
Your blood pressure and heart rate are normal. They're responding in a very normal way to the exercise. You look extremely comfortable and you're not having any symptoms. There are some people that we put through here who do develop symptoms even just during this minor amount of effort.
The data from all those thousands upon thousands of tests are stashed away in the basement. Here are the medical records of both the original 5,000 participants as well as the records of a second generation, Another 5,000 who were the sons and daughters of the first volunteers. You can find the very first person who was a participant in this study?
Sure.
This is like in a James Bond movie.
This is participant number 0001.
How old was this person when the study began?
She was about 30 when the study began, and she died about 30 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
We're able, by going back, to look at the relationship between blood pressure or cholesterol or smoking habit and risk for developing cardiovascular disease over time.
How often did she come in for a round of tests?
The original 5,000 participants were brought back every 2 years. In fact, right now we're in the midst of our 25th cycle of exams on the original study participants. And about 80% of the original participants have died. 20%, though, are still alive.
I was only 39. I was working for Alex Long, a car dealer.
Yeah.
But I was raising my children, she and I, Lorraine.
I was
But we kept
32
at it.
You were
when they first
32 when you
started
started?
When we started there,
It's been going over 50 years now.
yeah, we're going on 50
We've
years.
gone every 2 years for exams.
And has that been a bother for you?
No, it was great, because I
You
loved
get
it.
used to it.
We had a $500 exam for nothing.
You know what he said? I feel great when I go in there and they always find something.
8 weeks, I'm going to go home now.
We're having lunch with the Pavia family.
But I mean, you got to keep...
From them and the others in the study, we've learned most of what we know about the risk factors for heart disease. Things like high blood pressure, cholesterol, smoking. Indeed, the very term risk factors comes from the Framingham study.
Half the men and women watching this program are going to die from some kind of a vascular disease in the United States.
Bill Castelli ran the heart program for over 15 years, from 1979 to 1995.
The average person who's, at a risk to get a heart attack feels fine until the day they actually get the heart attack, and then they learn too late.
Well, I guess that's what's so important about having figured out that there were such things as risk factors, because the risk factors are the ones that can tell you before you ever have a sign that you have a problem.
That's right. See, if the motor's going good, you're not going to look under the hood.
Exactly, yeah.
Mr. Alda, I'm going to tell you about this test. I'm going to inflate this blood pressure cuff for 5 minutes. And
the heart study is always on the lookout for new and better predictors of trouble ahead.
during those 5 minutes,
One of the latest candidates has Birgitta Lehman checking out the springiness of the artery in my arm, a process which appears to involve first putting my arm to sleep by choking off its blood supply.
Why do you put that cloth there, to help my arm go to sleep?
Somehow it reminds people that they shouldn't move it, because they feel if they start moving the fingers, they feel that they are moving it because the towel is there. It's just my own invention.
Very good. A little thing like that, you see, a simple invention like that will save millions of lives eventually.
So, let me find your brachial artery. Here, you have a beautiful artery. You don't see any bumps or any white stuff. It's just as clear and smooth as I've ever seen it. I'm going to inflate the cuff now on your arm. It's going to be very, very tight, and it happens very, very suddenly, right now. That's sudden enough?
That was pretty sudden.
After about 5 minutes of pins and needles,
I'm going to release the cuff. Can you hear that? That's a great return. That's a great blood flow. It was like opening up a dam when I released the cuff, and the blood was just rushing forward. With very thick arteries, there's almost no change. There's almost no change. It takes so long for these stiff arteries to bounce open that maybe it takes them 2 or 3 minutes. So I don't get that psh, psh sound.
Another test being explored in the Framingham Heart Study is a little more elaborate, but its goal is the same: to find early warning signs of cardiovascular disease long before there are any symptoms. This magnetic resonance machine is at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. Happily, they provide music.
going to start your first scan. It lasts for about a minute.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Alda, take a breath in, blow it out, and hold it. Don't breathe.
While I hold my breath, the machine is making snapshots of my heart and chest. By taking pictures repeatedly as the heart is at different points of its beat, over time, the computer can build up a movie of the heart in motion.
Well, first we have good news. Everything looks very normal.
What do you mean, first you have good news? Is it going to be bad news later?
No, everything looks very good.
Okay.
Everything looks very good. These are some images we first took of your heart. And if this is your breastbone, we have your heart contracting right here. And I'll use this arrow. This is the front part of your heart. And you can see it's contracting vigorously. And the heart is the gray part. And the blood inside your heart is this white cavity right here. And you can see that all the walls, this is the bottom part of your heart, are contracting vigorously, squeezing, squeezing, squeezing. That all looks very good. These are some images of your aorta.
It was fun seeing my heart beating, but the real goal of the test is to get an image of my aorta, the big artery that carries blood from my heart to the lower half of my body.
This is your aorta. It's a nice black tube. And you can see that the thin white line surrounding the aorta is normal vessel wall. We don't see any plaques. Looks very nice.
My aorta looks so good, I'm going to start sending this picture out instead of an 8x10. It's really nice.
We can give you a picture of it if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. You know, because I believe it's what's inside that counts, you know? In contrast to my impeccable aorta, this one has a visible buildup plaque, which, while it's unlikely to cause problems itself, could be a warning sign that plaque is building up in more vulnerable blood vessels, like the coronary arteries of the heart itself. When the day comes that we'll use this for screening the whole population, if that day comes, not only will you be able to tell me I'm liable to develop symptoms soon, but you can use this picture to actually design a drug therapy that's just right for me? Is that right?
That's our long-term hope. For example, today we know that if your cholesterol is high, that we should treat you. We should treat all people who have a high cholesterol. But it may be that we find from studies like the one going on in Framingham that if your cholesterol is high, but you don't have any plaque on your MR, that we don't have to be as aggressive. Just diet therapy alone without taking pills is sufficient. Similarly, we know that some people with a low cholesterol still have heart attacks, still have strokes. It may be that those people actually have plaques in their aorta, and it's not the cholesterol that we should be monitoring, but actually the plaques themselves.
In an even more ambitious project, Warren Manning, as well as many other researchers, is working on an MR technique to visualize directly the coronary arteries themselves. Well, what do you think? You think someday this is going to be so predictive that we'll be crazy if we don't regularly get an MRI?
I hope so. I think at some point people will blow out the birthday candles when they reach 40 or 50 and say it's time to have the screening MR. That day is not here today, but I believe it will be here in the future.
Bill Castelli, who headed the heart study for over 15 years, now runs a clinic to motivate people to change their risk factors. It turns out that his simplest advice is also advice most of us don't want to hear.
Most Americans would do okay if they just got the portion sizes down. I mean, I go to France a lot. You know, the French, you say, well, they eat those rich foods.
Yeah, but they give you such little...
Yeah, you go to dinner in France, you think it's the hors d'oeuvres, it's the whole meal. You know, it's that small.
That's why I stay away from France.
Yeah. But see, we
you ever go to Italy?
that's a little better.
For over 50 years, the Pavia family and their neighbors in Framingham have helped write the rules for avoiding heart disease. As it enters its second half-century and begins recruiting a third generation, the Framingham Heart Study will be refining those rules to the point where we'll each know precisely our risks for heart disease. Then, as it is now, but more so, it will be up to us. Come visit us at PBS Online. Scientific American Frontiers can be found on the World Wide Web at pbs.org or America Online, keyword PBS. I'm about to be tickled by a tickling machine. The question is, will I laugh? I'm Alan Alda. Join me in my laugh box next time as scientific... as Scientific American Frontiers explores more of life's little questions.
Brought to you by
Agilent Technologies. The next generation of wireless communication is here, and technologies from Agilent are helping make it all possible. We've taken the fiction out of science fiction.
This program is also made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. To order this episode on video cassette or other programs from Scientific American Frontiers, call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.